Hey, I'm Geoffrey McCullough, and you just clicked on another episode of Design Doc. If you want to go as fast as possible down straightaways in a race, it's all about how you exit corners. By plotting out a line that involves the least amount of slowing down and cutting through the apex of the turn, you're able to put the pedal down a lot sooner, allowing you to race through the straightaways. This is called a racing line. Racing games have been around since the dawn of video games as we know them today. But obviously back then they couldn't pull off the same kind of intense simulations that today's technology can. Thus the genre of arcade racer was born. The name comes from, well, the arcades. Back when racing games needed to have very accessible gameplay in order for players with pockets full of quarters to put it in and just drive on and have a good time without having to worry about stuff like tire pressures or track temperature. They can just go on and drift however the heart pleases. And because these games took a very fast and loose approach to emulating actual racing, we saw a lot of interesting mechanics be added to racing games that fundamentally changed how players go through the corners. Arcade racers are where we saw game designers mess with the fundamental principles of racing games. What if they were in flying vehicles instead of cars? What if we strapped guns to the cars? Heck, why don't we reward players for slamming into one another? Racing games over the years have gotten very creative with how they spice up the gameplay between green flag to checkered flag. We're going to look at several different ways various video games have dealt with one mechanic that has spawned out of the arcade racing genre. The boost meter. Since it's, well, a racing game, the biggest way you can reward players is by making them go faster, and thus changing the way the players get boost or use boost will fundamentally change how they navigate the game's tracks. Today, I've chosen 3 different games that use very different boost mechanics that completely change how players attack the tracks in the game. This is Design Doc, where I examine seemingly simple aspects of game design. In this episode, minding the boost meter. Since we're talking about boosting, why don't we start off with a game that's really fast? FZero GX is the third, and unfortunately for fans, most recent entry into the FZero franchise. And while FZero X, the second game in the series, uses the exact same game mechanics, we're gonna look at GX because hey, it's my show. Now, I'm going to use FZero GX to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, as the game has 2 different mechanics I want to talk about that get players going fast. FZero GX is a game about navigating a tiny ship at ludicrous speeds. By using the L and R buttons to shift around the corners, and even using your attack button to make slight corrections, FZero GX is all about navigating very tight corners at very high speeds. It's a game about mastery, where you need to plot racing lines that not only hit the heel pads so you can keep your energy meter up, but also hitting all the speed pads located on the track. Boost pads are a mainstay of arcade racing games. They are little pads on the track, or maybe they're entire strips, that reward players for going over them by giving them a giant boost of speed. Boost pads are great for track designers, as their placement fundamentally shifts where players try to go on the track. If a track is designed well, it may present interesting choices for the players to make. Do I take this item box? Do I take the boost pad? Does the boost pad even make this line worth it? All of these causes players to experiment with their racing lines. You lose energy by running into your opponents or the wall. And if you run out of energy, that's it. You're done. Thanks for participating. Goodbye. But once you complete your first lap, you're able to expend your energy meter for a gigantic speed boost. This adds a whole new layer of gameplay. Where do players expend their health for boost without being too risky? You can use your boost as much as you want until you run out of energy. And if you try to boost without energy, it leaves you with just a pixel of health. This pushes players to experiment with where, when, and how much boost to use on certain points of the track. And push you the game will. FZero GX has a notorious reputation for its insane difficulty. The AI on its hardest difficulty, Master Mode, features a huge grid of machines waiting to run you down if you make one mistake. If the average player wants to win any of the GPs or story missions on Master Mode, they're going to have to spend hours, if not months, learning the ins and outs of each track, trying to keep their cool. It's this element of memorization and demanding perfect execution from the player that FZero GX retains its player base. Man, a futuristic racing game that demands perfection. I wonder where I've heard that one before. Since we've already talked about Nintendo property, we might as well go ahead and talk about one of the most popular kart racing games of all time, Mario Kart. It's impossible. The moment anybody says the words kart racer, they're immediately thinking about the portly dude in the red hat going around on his scooter. Mario Kart has item panels, which would later turn into item boxes. Driving over these would reward the player with an item that they can use to either disrupt other players or give themselves an advantage. One of these items is the mushroom, the game's boost item. Using a mushroom causes you to boost forward with a considerable amount of speed. Not only that, but you're also immune to the slowing effect of the grass and dirt found in the off-track sections. This allows you to cut corners you otherwise wouldn't be able to, using the game's fast fungus. Since Mario Kart changes the probability of the items that you get out of an item box based on your track position, you usually only find mushrooms when you're further back in the pack, and there are some shortcuts that can only be used by use of a mushroom. Along with items such as the blue shell and the bullet bill, allowing players further back to access shortcuts that first place can't is another way that Mario Kart tries to cut down on the difference between first and last. It's this idea that anybody can come from behind to win a Mario Kart race that's completely shaped the whole franchise, for better or worse. While there are good lessons we can learn by games implementing their boost mechanics well, I think there's also a lot to learn out of games that don't implement their mechanics as well. And with that, we venture from the excellent to the mediocre. Insane 2 is an off-road racing game where the big gimmick is that the maps seamlessly wrap in on themselves. This is a bit hard to explain with words, so I guess I'll explain it with Pac-Man. You know how when you go too far to the left, you wrap around the right side? Imagine that, but with an open-world off-road racing game. The game's terrain is full of rocks, dirt, mud, and mountains the players need to drive around and traverse. On these maps, you can either race through checkpoints, try to claim as many gates as possible, try to stay within a helicopter searchlight, or run over crates that fall from the sky for points. And in order to get through the terrain quickly, you have to utilize the game's boost system. That meter in the bottom right corner of your screen is your boost meter, which you can use at any time to get a quick burst of inertia. Now, the fact the boost comes back on its own without doing anything special is a big missed opportunity from the game. Although you can say that there's some difficulty with traversing the terrain in the first place, because there's no reward for the player to get creative with the paths they take, the easiest way to win events is just by going straight as the crow flies to the objective. And because of this, the game ends up feeling rather boring and hollow. Take either Flatout 2 or Burnout 3 as an example. They both use a very similar boost mechanic system. Let's look at Flatout 2 first. Instead of just getting boost over time, Flatout 2 rewards the player for engaging in its demolition derby gameplay. It rewards players with boost for causing destruction, either running into objects on the map or by dealing damage to their opponents. Burnout 3's system is also very similar. However, that game has a big theme of risk versus reward.
Take risks, you get reward. Get it?
The risk is that you have to perform very dangerous maneuvers, such as going into oncoming traffic or dueling with your opponents. The reward being boost! And the game's ultimate reward is by taking out your opponents, which grants an increase to your boost capacity. These two games tie their boost meters to the core identity of the games. Flatout 2 is about causing as much destruction as possible, and Flatout 3 is all about its risk versus reward mentality. Insane 2 does not tie its boost mechanic into any of its core gameplay elements. Thus why it feels so hollow. I feel like Insane 2 can be solved by one simple tweak, allowing you to gain boost from airtime. Insane 2's maps are full of bumps and ramps everywhere. Encouraging players to take risks by going off of them will encourage a lot more interesting racing lines than just going as the crow flies to the next checkpoint. The map design is so perfectly tailored to this that I cannot believe the developers did not think of this during development. Well, enough ranting about a game that nobody watching this video probably even remembers. So there you have it. Everything from using your health meter as a boost, item boxes, tying the boost meter to your fundamental principles of your game. These are all ways developers have been able to play with the boost meter in order to alter the ways you race. Which game had your favorite boost mechanic? Maybe there was a game I should have talked about in today's video. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. I'm sure there's a racing game I haven't played before that's done something really cool with boosting. I'm Geoffrey McCullough, and thank you so much for watching this episode of Design Doc. I'll see you next week.